Welcome to r/slash Prorevenge, where a greedy family member screws himself out of $100,000. I spent 2 years working for a particular boss who I'll call Dan. Dan was, and almost certainly still is, the most unacceptable human being I have ever had the displeasure of encountering. He was a compulsive liar, a narcissist, short-tempered, unethical, unreasonable, unintelligent, and abusive. I once witnessed him spend half an hour shouting at a salesman for wearing shoes that Dan didn't approve of. Not inappropriate shoes, mind you, but just ones that Dan didn't like. The salesman in question could have gone home and changed his shoes in the time that Dan spent cursing him out and belittling him. He also sold a client secondhand computers, claiming they were new and priced as new ones. The man not only assaulted me, but verbally and emotionally abused me for the better part of 2 years, and did everything in his power to keep me under his thumb. He constantly micromanaged me, to the point of just dictating to me what I should write in an email to a client. If it wasn't done exactly his way, it wasn't correct. I had to argue with him just to get a freaking sick day, even though I'm legally entitled to it. I was woefully underpaid and on call 24/7. This made it difficult for me to find other employment and is one of the reasons I stayed as long as I did. He made my life absolutely miserable, and I developed a bit of a drinking problem as a result. I recently watched a presentation on domestic violence, and his behavior is a textbook case of what DV abusers do. I could go on and on about the things that this man did to be the biggest butthole he could be, but this is Prorevenge, not Bad Bosses, so I'll get to the story. One day, Dan and I had a disagreement about something. I was right, and I had the emails to prove it, and I was frankly fed up with his BS. I told him I wouldn't be going to work because I was taking a sick day. He proceeded to shove me down to the ground. He's a big guy, probably one of the reasons he's gotten away with being the human garbage he is for so long, and starts trying to strangle me. I was able to fend him off and escape, and after I did, I filed a police report. There were no witnesses, so that was going to go nowhere. He actually had one of his other subordinates make a claim that the alleged assault didn't happen. Said subordinate wasn't there at the time, so false report. I naturally told everyone I knew, and all his clients that contacted me afterwards. I was their primary IT support, so quite a few of them had my personal number. That I'd filed a police report against him for assault. I specifically said it that way because, unlike simply claiming that he assaulted me, telling people I filed a report was unarguably true and not slanderous. A lot of his clients were already not happy with the services he provided, internet and PBX, so that certainly turned a lot of them off of renewing their contracts. A very close family friend of mine, Carol, was naturally one of the first to hear about the assault. I left the country about a month later in search of better opportunities, but my friend remained, and became the chairman of the board of trustees for the body corporate of the neighborhood where Dan lived. A body corporate is basically like an HOA, but with different laws governing them. She set her sights on making his life torture. Dan had a broken down car that had been broken down for over a year at that point. He never had the money to fix it because he's a sucky businessman who never seemed to realize that his business model had really tiny profit margins. And the rules of the neighborhood were changed to force broken down cars to be towed away. If the owner didn't tow it, the body corporate would, and charge the owner, and fine them. So Dan was fined a few times. Not small amounts either. And when he was fined, he did what he always does when things don't go his way. Throw an effing tantrum while having no legs to stand on. The tantrum in this case was several expletive-filled emails to the body corporate, which is just a great way to endear yourself to someone who already hates you, which got him fined again for breaking the conduct code. This, combined with the loss of revenue for his business, has led to him not having any substantial income for over half a year now. He has no car, nor the money to buy one. Several of his big clients are definitely not going to renew contracts with him, and he appears to no longer have any staff in his employ. Nobody's been coming to his house in months now, and the body corporate is pressuring his landlord to evict him. He's well and truly ducked. I'm living happily in another country now and got an awesome job that pays 20 times what working for him did. Yes, really, 20 times more money. That's how little I made under him. I think this is the first and only story I've read about an HOA actually doing something good. In any event, congrats OP, and I'm glad you're in a much better situation. That sounds awful. Our next Reddit post is from False Rip. I worked at a fairly well-known restaurant in a small northern New England city as an assistant manager. The owners were very successful restaurateurs with several successful non-chain establishments, and spent maybe a day or two a month in our location. The rest of the time there was a general manager in charge. We'll call her Jan. Jan was about as type A as they come. She was a middle-aged woman, but beautiful and petite, and she always looked put together and primped. Jan had started with the owners a decade earlier in their first restaurant as a server and had worked her way up to general manager over the years. At first, I just thought she had extremely high standards, which I respected. I have high standards as well and take pride in my work. I'd been impressed by how the kitchens were spotless, the staff was immaculate. Like, run a white-gloved hand under the back of the oven and it comes back white kind of clean. And the food was always top quality. I'd frequently been a customer and was thrilled that I got the job there. I'd been in the business for a decade and that restaurant was the place in our area. I was so excited. Unfortunately, I quickly learned why everything is so shining and perfect. Jan was a tyrant. She was the kind of boss who soured the mood of the entire staff, like a storm cloud hovering over us that never went away. Nothing was ever good enough, and the standards changed from day to day. On a good day, she would shut herself up in the office and then leave early. Good days were very rare and could turn into bad days at the drop of a dime. On bad days, you couldn't be perfect enough and she would come up with new rules and regulations just to punish people. If a host called out sick, they were literal children. She would berate them on the phone and make them cry. If a cook made a mistake on a plate, she would humiliate them in front of the staff, accuse them of doing it on purpose, and then give us all the silent treatment for hours after. Seriously. If someone's cash out was off, even by a few cents, she would accuse them of theft and force me to cut down their hours. As a fellow manager, I was mostly spared her awful behavior, though I had to hear about her treatment from my staff almost every day. All of this was just run-of-the-mill bad boss stuff until it came time for our yearly staff evaluation meetings. This is where Raul enters the story. Raul was a hardworking dishwasher who had moved to our state from Puerto Rico a few years earlier and spoke English with some difficulty. Whenever I had to go over anything official with him, we would have a coworker translate between us to make sure we were both communicating clearly. Jan refused this courtesy to Raul. This made his evaluation pretty difficult. Raul managed to communicate to us that due to recent cuts in his hours, he would be forced to get a second job to pay the bills. Something about this absolutely set Jan off. She told him she would fire him if he dared. I could see plainly on the intake paperwork in front of me that Raul had been hired with the understanding that it would be a full-time position, so I pointed that out. Jan was furious, but agreed through gritted teeth that if Raul agreed not to get a second job, she would bump his hours up to at least 35 hours a week. It was stated as clear as day, and I documented it in my daily manager logbook. Work went on as usual after that, and I didn't think much of this meeting again for a few months. Another time a while later, while filling out information for tax returns, Jan called me into the office. I could tell she had pulled the tiny room apart looking for something. "All the information about our Puerto Rican employees is gone," she told me with a mixture of panic and suspicion. I looked at the files in question and they all seemed to be in order, so I was confused and told her I couldn't help. A few minutes later, I walked back in the office to find her arguing with Rosa, our most talented chef and a Puerto Rican native. Rosa was perfectly fluent in English. "No, Rosa." Jan was speaking to Rosa as though she were hard of hearing or mentally slow. "Where is your green card?" "What are you talking about?" Rosa was confused. "Are you an illegal or something? Is that why one of you broke in here? To hide the proof?" Jan wasn't yelling, but her eyes were cold and flashing with rage. "What?" Rosa was starting to get angry now, It suddenly clicked for me, so I interrupted. Jan, you do realize that Puerto Rico is a United States territory, right? Of course I know that, Jan snapped back. Okay, so you know that Rosa has a social security number like any other American native. Oh, right. Never mind, Rosa, you can go back to work. Jan didn't apologize for accusing Rosa of theft. I was so done with this place after that. Jan did all kinds of little things like that, and she never apologized. I'd already gotten a job offer for a place closer to my house when the final straw came. I was the closing manager one day and got in just before the dinner rush to see Raul storming out the back door. He didn't speak much English, but his cursing was very clear. Jan had lied about raising his hours to 35 per week, so Raul had gotten the second job he talked about. When Jan found out, she fired him, but not before saying something about how all you illegals are the same. She was really fixated on these American citizens being illegal aliens for some reason. By this point, I effing hated this woman too. She once told me my clothing made me look poor in front of the whole staff. I was wearing what she made me wear. Meanwhile, she wore open-toed shoes behind the line, which is against health codes. And once, her fake nail fell into the coleslaw, and she wouldn't let anyone toss it out after she retrieved it. This is just the tip of the iceberg, but I have a life to live. Since I knew I would be leaving soon anyway, I told Raul he should go after our boss for wrongful termination since I had documented proof, with Jan's signature, that he had been promised more hours and that Jan had broken the agreement, not Raul. The last time I saw Jan was on my way out of Raul's lawyer's office after giving a deposition about several labor laws she'd violated. At least, the ones I knew about. Apparently, there were many others she had broken in front of other employees. She couldn't even look me in the eye. The best part? In my deposition, I learned that Jan was actually the one who was illegally in the country. Her green card had recently expired. She was Canadian. She ended up being sent back to Canada as a result of this case, and no one has heard from her since. Raul was granted 6 months of unemployment pay, plus the restaurant had to pay his legal fees. They closed that location not long after. Maybe they should hire their managers more carefully next time. Jan, if you're reading this, I hope you got your stuff together. I also hope you learned to wear closed-toe shoes behind the line. You wouldn't want to end up in a huge, gigantic screw-up due to your own negligence now, would you? Man, the irony. An illegal citizen accusing an actual citizen of being illegal. What a moron. Canada, you can have her. Our next Reddit post is from JerkTits. Shortly after my father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, my formerly estranged half-brother quit his job and moved in to take care of my dad. Though there really wasn't enough money, it was agreed to pay him around $300 a week to make up for him missing income. During this time, my half-brother abruptly acquired durable power of attorney and usurped medical and financial decisions. My mother and father had separate financial lives. Several documents relating to my dad's pension, which were now my half-brother's responsibility, were not turned in on time, resulting in my dad missing out on a one-time payout of $8,000 and lowering his pension payout by $300 a month. My half-brother then cleaned out my dad's remaining savings, about $3,000, not discovered until about a month later. 6 days later, our father hanged himself in the basement. My dad left all of his insurance money and belongings to my mother. Us children were left with only sentimental items. My half-brother was visibly upset and shaking when the will was read. He acknowledged that my mother was receiving everything and left. About a month later, we discovered the missing money. Though he broke no laws because he had power of attorney, we insisted he pay it back, even offered to let him make payments over a 2-year period. He refused, and we've been no contact for 2 years now. Little did he know that he was in my mom's, his stepmother's, will. He would receive half of what is currently a $250,000 estate. I suggested to my mother that she remove him from the will. She did, and I am now the sole beneficiary. He stole $3,000 now, only to lose out on $125,000 later. The best thing about this is not only did this douchebag get screwed over $125K, but OP just doubled his inheritance. Win-win. That was rSlash Prorevenge, and if you liked my videos, then please hit that like button, because it lets YouTube know that this video is worth sharing to other people, which really helps my channel grow.